What if you could see death before it happened? And no one believed you? What if the faces in your dreams were the same people who died days later, exactly the way you saw it? In a small Nigerian village, a shy young woman wakes from a nightmare that shows her own funeral. And the knock on her door tells her the nightmare may have already begun. Can fate be changed? Or is she living under a curse she can never escape? The night was heavy with silence, the kind that seemed to press against the walls of Mama Grace's mud house. The only sound was the soft hiss of the kerosene lamp and the restless rustle of dry palm leaves on the roof. Amara lay on her raffia mat, her breathing uneven, her face damp with sweat despite the cool Harmattan breeze slipping through the cracks. In her dream, she stood barefoot in the village square under the giant almond tree. The sky was swollen with dark clouds, and the air smelled of wet earth and incense. All around her, the villagers were gathered in silence. Their faces were pale, eyes swollen from crying. Then she saw it, a white coffin carried on the shoulders of 4 men, swaying gently as they walked. Behind them, women in faded wrappers beat their chests, wailing in deep, hollow voices that seemed to echo inside her bones. And there, in the coffin, lay Mr. Okon, the schoolteacher. His face was unnaturally still, his lips pale. A single fly buzzed around his ear. The priest's voice rose, chanting words she could not fully hear. Amara felt her own body trembling, as if she was standing in the middle of a storm. And then, Mr. Oken's eyes opened, staring straight at her, unblinking. She gasped and bolted upright, her heart thudding against her ribs. The room was dark now. The lamp had gone out. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts. She pressed her hands to her chest, trying to steady herself, but the image of his lifeless face clung to her mind like smoke. Morning came too quickly. Chickens scratched in the dust outside. Mama Grace hummed softly as she pounded yam in the kitchen hut. Amara said nothing about the dream, telling herself it was just a strange trick of the mind. But 2 days later, the sound of the church bell tore through the air. A boy ran past shouting, "Mr. Okon is dead!" Amara's hands froze around the calabash of water she was carrying. The world tilted around her, and she knew the dream had not been a trick at all. The day after Mr. Okon's burial, Oru village felt different. The air seemed thicker, heavy with a silence that wasn't quite grief anymore. It was something sharper, colder. Wherever Amara walked, eyes followed her, quick to turn away when she looked back. At the market square, women selling peppers lowered their voices when she passed. "That's her," one hissed, barely moving her lips. "The one who saw it before it happened." Another woman clicked her tongue. Child like that. Something is not clean about her spirit." Amara kept her gaze on the ground, clutching the small basket of palm nuts she had brought to sell. But the whispers seemed to weave themselves into the wind, finding their way into her ears, no matter how hard she tried to block them out. Even the children, usually loud and restless, stared at her with wide, wary eyes before darting behind their mother's wrappers. When she reached the pepper stall, Mama Ifeoma shifted uncomfortably, her smile tight. "Amara! Maybe today, you sell somewhere else," she said softly, glancing at the other traders, as if afraid to be seen speaking to her. That evening, at home, she tried to push it aside. Mama Grace was shelling ground nuts in the corner, her fingers working slowly, eyes fixed on her task. Normally, she would ask Amara about her day, about who she met, about what the market was like. But tonight, she said nothing. Amara's chest ached at the distance. "Mama Grace," she whispered, "do you believe what they're saying?" The old woman paused for a long moment before answering. "People fear what they don't understand," she said at last. Her voice was calm, but it didn't warm the air between them. Only Daniel, the young mechanic, who sometimes brought her palm oil to sell in the city, treated her the same. That evening, he came by, leaning on the doorway with an easy smile. "You're not cursed, Amara," he said. "You just see things others can't." But deep inside, Amara knew the village was changing, and so was her life. The fear had begun, and it would not stop here. The night air was cool, but Amara lay restless on her raffia mat, staring into the darkness. She had gone to bed with the weight of 100 stairs on her back, the whispers from the market still gnawing at her mind. At some point, her eyes closed, and the dream came. She was standing at the roadside bus stop, the red dust swirling around her ankles. The smell of frying akara drifted through the air, warm and familiar. Mama Ifeoma stood behind her stall, her laughter ringing like a bell as she served a man in a faded blue shirt. Then, without warning, her body jerked. She began coughing violently, clutching at her throat. The bowl of akara slipped from her hands, scattering into the dust. People rushed toward her, shouting, but their voices were muffled, as though Amara was hearing them from deep underwater. Mama Ifeoma fell to her knees, gasping, her eyes wide with panic. In the dream, Amara's own hands reached out, but they passed straight through her like smoke. And then, Mama Ifeoma stopped moving. Amara woke with a choked cry, her body shaking. The walls of the small room felt as if they were closing in on her. She sat with her knees drawn up, rocking herself slowly until the first light of dawn. 3 days later, on a bright Sunday morning, the village road was alive with chatter and the smell of frying beans. Amara had almost convinced herself it had only been nightmare until the sound of panicked shouting split the air. She turned, her stomach tightening into a knot. There, in front of her stall, Mama Ifeoma was on her knees, coughing, her face pale and slick with sweat. The same blue-shirted man tried to help, but within moments she collapsed completely. The crowd screamed. Someone shouted for water. Someone else screamed her name. Amara stood frozen, her basket slipping from her hands. She didn't need to see the end. She already knew. Rain threatened all afternoon, a gray sheet hanging over Oru, as if the sky itself was withholding breath. Amara walked home slowly. The road familiar and suddenly strange, every whispered conversation curving away from her like smoke. Children who used to chase her for kola nuts now slipped behind doorways when she neared. A goat bleated and tugged at a rope. Even that sounded like a warning. At the compound, Mama Grace sat on a low stool under the eaves, peeling cassava with small, precise strokes. She did not look up when Amara entered. The knife scraped the tuber, steady, careful, like someone trying not to cut more than she must. "I can help," Amara said, voice small. "Leave it," Mama Grace answered, still peeling. "Wash your hands. Food will soon be ready." They ate apart for the first time Amara could remember. Mama Grace by the doorway, Amara on a wooden bench by the window, the silence between them wide as a river. The soup tasted of okra and smoke, and the ache of unsaid things. When Amara reached for the calabash of water, Mama Grace stood and set it down midway, as if a line had been drawn across the room that neither of them could cross. Night spread across the village, and with it, fear. Amara lay on her mat, counting her breaths, terrified of sleep. Dreams had become doors she couldn't keep shut. She lit the stub of a candle and watched the flame tremble. Each time her eyes drifted, she startled awake, palms slick, listening for something she could not name. The next morning, church bells called the village to prayer. Amara tied her scarf and followed the path, determined to claim a small corner of peace. Inside, the pews creaked with bodies and suspicion. A woman shifted her child away. Another pressed her lips thin and stared at the hymn book without singing. When the offering tray came, the boy holding it avoided her hands, stretching his arms so the tray hovered awkwardly in front of her chest. Outside the church gate, 2 men muttered near the mango tree. "Since she started seeing things, look at what has happened," one said. "Better for her to leave this place," the other replied, "before more shadows follow." Amara felt the words land like stones. That evening, Daniel arrived, dusty from the road, the scent of engine oil clinging to his shirt. He stood in the doorway for a long heartbeat, studying her face. "You're not sleeping," he said quietly. I'm afraid of what I'll see. He nodded, jaw tight. Then we change what you see. How? Her voice almost broke. Come with me, Daniel said. To the city. Work a little, breathe different air. We'll find a room near the workshop. You can start again. Behind them, Mama Grace's knife paused mid-air. The quiet stretched, trembling. Amara's throat burned. Mama? The old woman still did not look up. A river that refuses to flow will turn to swamp, she said. Go where your spirit can move. The wind lifted the curtain, cool and damp with oncoming rain. Amara felt it brush her skin like a hand opening a door. She did not trust hope, but she recognized a path when it appeared. Okay, she whispered. I'll go. The morning she left Oru, the sun had not yet climbed over the hills. Mist clung low to the ground, curling around her ankles as if trying to hold her back. Amara balanced a small bundle on her head, 2 wrappers, a faded blouse, a comb, and the wooden rosary Mama Grace had given her when she was 12. Mama Grace stood at the edge of the compound, arms folded tightly across her chest. Her eyes were unreadable in the dim light. Remember who you are, she said, her voice flat but trembling at the edges. And remember, the city is not always kinder than the village. Daniel waited by the road, leaning on his old motorbike. He had borrowed a friend's van to take her to the bus park. You ready? He asked. Amara only nodded. The village lay silent behind her, but she could feel the weight of its eyes on her back, those who believed she was cursed, and those who feared she might bring that curse elsewhere. The journey to Lagos was long and restless. Dust and wind blew through the open windows of the crowded bus. A baby cried somewhere behind her. A woman argued with the conductor over change, and a hawker pushed roasted corn through the window at a stop. By the time they reached the city, it was late afternoon. Lagos was noise and light, and motion okadas weaving between cars. The scent of roasted plantain mixed with exhaust fumes. Hawkers shouting the names of their goods. Buses honking in bursts. Amara stared through the glass, her chest tight. It was overwhelming, but it was also a place where no one knew her name. Daniel found her a small room in a crowded tenement close to the workshop. The walls were thin, the ceiling patched with tin, but it was hers. For the first time in months, she could walk the streets without hearing whispers. She dared to believe the dreams might stop. That night, she closed her eyes with a quiet prayer. But the darkness did not bring peace. It brought a man in a blue shirt, standing beneath a half-built building, and the scream of metal before everything went black. The dream left Amara shivering, her fingers clutching the edge of her thin blanket. She had seen it so clearly, the man in the blue shirt crushed under falling metal, his lifeless body sprawled on the ground. She tried to shake it off, as just another vision of a stranger. But the city had taught her something cruel. Even strangers in her dreams were not safe. For days, she avoided crowded places, keeping her head down when passing construction sites. The people in the compound barely noticed her, too busy with their own hustle. Daniel visited often, bringing small bags of rice or bread, teasing her into conversation when she retreated into silence. His voice, warm and steady, was the only thing that cut through the constant hum of the city. Then, one night, sleep took her again, and this time, it wasn't a stranger. She saw Daniel lying on a wet roadside, his motorbike twisted beside him, its front wheel still spinning. Blood pooled beneath his head, bright against the dark asphalt. His eyes were half closed, his lips moving as though trying to speak, but no sound came. Amara woke with a scream, her chest heaving. The sound of her own voice echoed against the walls. Tears slid hot and fast down her cheeks as she clutched the rosary in her hand. The next morning, she went straight to Daniel's workshop. He was tightening bolts on a car engine, his shirt damp with sweat. "Daniel," she blurted, "you must not ride your bike. Please, promise me." He wiped his hands on a rag and gave her a puzzled look. "Why? What happened?" She hesitated, afraid of sounding mad. "I saw something. You were hurt. Badly. I don't want it to happen." Daniel's lips curved into a faint smile, but his eyes searched hers. Amara, you've carried too many fears. I'm fine. Nothing will happen to me. But as she watched him that day, laughing with the other mechanics, she couldn't shake the image. The city might have been far from Oru, but the shadows from her dreams had followed her here and now. They had found the only person she trusted. The days that followed were heavy with dread. Amara began to notice every small danger around Daniel, the way he swerved too close to buses when riding, the loose gravel on sharp bends, the careless Okada riders who cut across traffic. Each time he climbed onto his motorbike, her stomach tightened until it ached. For a week, Daniel humored her request, leaving his bike parked and taking the bus or walking to nearby jobs. But work in the city was unpredictable. One cloudy afternoon, his boss stormed into the workshop, shouting about a customer who needed an urgent delivery across town. The part was heavy, the roads were bad, and the only way to get there quickly was by bike. "I'll be back before you know it," Daniel told her, adjusting his helmet. He smiled, but Amara saw the impatience in his eyes. "No, Daniel, please." She grabbed his arm, her fingers trembling. "Don't ride today, I beg you." He sighed and gently pried her hand away. "It's just a job, Amara. I'll be fine." The sound of the engine roared in her ears as he sped off. She stood frozen for a moment, her heart pounding, before she broke into a run. The sky was low and gray, the air thick with the smell of rain. Her slippers slapped against the wet pavement, splashing through puddles. Somewhere ahead, a sudden crash split the air, the grinding scream of metal on asphalt, followed by the sharp, sickening thud of something heavy hitting the ground. Voices rose in alarm. Amara's legs carried her faster, her breath burning in her throat. When she turned the corner, her eyes found him instantly. Daniel lay sprawled on the slick road, his bike twisted beside him. The front wheel spun slowly, clicking with each turn. For a heartbeat, she couldn't move. The scene was exactly as she had dreamed. Every detail matched the rain-darkened road, the gathering crowd, the helpless ache in her chest. Her voice tore free. "Daniel!" And then she was running toward him, praying she wasn't too late. Rain poured harder, drumming on the road, running in silver streams around Daniel's still body. Amara dropped to her knees beside him, her hands hovering helplessly before finally pressing against his chest. "Daniel, please, please stay with me," she begged, her voice breaking. For a moment, there was nothing. No response, no movement, only the sound of the rain and the murmurs of the gathering crowd. Then his eyes fluttered open, cloudy with pain, but still holding her gaze. A faint smile curved his lips. "You came," he whispered. Her heart lurched. "Don't talk, the ambulance is coming." But he shook his head slightly, rainwater running down his temple. "You saved me. In your dream. I died, but you changed it." Amara's breath caught. She looked around in the vision. He had been still, lifeless. Here, he was breathing, fighting. Her hands trembled as she pressed down on the wound in his side, not daring to hope. The ambulance arrived, lights flashing red against the gray sky. 2 paramedics lifted him onto a stretcher, their voices brisk and urgent. Amara climbed in beside him, holding his hand the entire way to the hospital. Hours later, Daniel was stable, the doctors saying it was a miracle he had survived the crash with only a fractured rib and bruises. Amara sat by his bed, the exhaustion finally sinking into her bones. That night, in the quiet of her small room, she allowed herself to close her eyes without fear. For the first time in years, she believed she might have power over the visions. But sleep brought her no peace. She found herself in a different place, lying inside a coffin lined with white satin. Her hands were folded over her chest, a string of Mama Grace's wooden rosary resting between them. Faces hovered above her, Mama Grace weeping, Daniel looking hollow, strangers peering down. Amara's eyes snapped open. The clock beside her read 7:59 a.m. Her breath came fast, her skin cold. Then came the knock on her door. 3 slow, deliberate taps, and the room seemed to tilt, as if the dream had already begun. The end. If this story touched your heart, imagine the next one we have waiting for you. Please subscribe now so you never miss a single tale. And tell me in the comments, do you believe she could have escaped her fate? Or was the ending already written? What would you do if you saw your own death before it happened? See you next time. Thanks for watching.